Nosferatu, a Symphony of Horror, 1922, silent black and white horror film starring Max Schreck as Nosferatu and Count Orlok. It's a film based, it's one of the earliest horror movies, I think, and it's based on the book Dracula by Bram Stoker. What's interesting is that the filmmakers didn't actually secure copyrights to the book. So there are numerous changes to the story, like the names. Dracula is now called Nosferatu, Count Dracula is now called Count Orlok. The setting is changed in regards to the city. Previously, it took place mostly in Transylvania and in London. Now it takes place in Transylvania and in a small German town. Some characters were cut, the story was streamlined and made simpler and shorter. So the main storyline goes that there's a young man that works in Germany for an estate agent, and he is sent to Transylvania to meet up with this Count Orlok, this mysterious man, who is eyeing to buy a house in this little town. So he goes there to finalize the transaction to convince him to buy one of the estates that are under this agent's care. And he spends a couple of days in the castle, and with each day he grows more uneasy because it becomes apparent that Count Orlok is kind of weird. He's creepy and increasingly terrifying, even. And then the young guy wakes up every day with bite marks on his neck, and eventually he figures out that Orlok is in fact Nosferatu, the vampire, the dreaded vampire around the Transylvanian parts. However, before he does that, it's already almost too late because Nosferatu is on his way to the German town where he finalizes the transaction, buys the house, stays there, and then mysterious deaths around the city start happening. So, back to the copyrights, the one thing I wanted to mention, which was really interesting to me, is that after the movie's release, Bram Stoker's estate actually sued the movie production company for using the novel as the basis of the film without having the right to do so. And they won that trial, they bankrupted the company completely, and all copies of the film were ordered to be burned. However, a few of them survived, and they were circulated around Germany and then around the world as a sort of first ever cult film, literally cult film, because it needed to be passed on in secret. And then it became one of the most influential early films, early black and white silent movies. Its influence on the horror genre and on the imagery of horror genre is it cannot be overstated. I mean, if you look at the images of Max Schreck as Nosferatu, he's instantly recognizable. He's been copied, parodied even, and he influenced a lot of other images of vampires in media in the following years. In fact, I think the problem of Nosferatu nowadays is that it is the basis of so many things, along with Dracula, of course. It has been the basis of so many things, story-wise, but also visually speaking. But watching it now, you don't feel excited about it because you don't realize that this was the first instance where they used it, right? So you watch it and you think, I saw it 50 times already, but yeah, but this was the first one. And if you don't have that, if you don't have that realization, that knowledge, I think that the movie won't be as effective. In terms of its effectiveness, when it was released, it was highly praised for the atmosphere it created and the uneasy feelings that it evoked. People were seriously creeped out and terrified by, especially by Nosferatu whenever he was on screen. Because of the time it was made and released, horror movies didn't really use the tricks that they use today so often. The jump scares, the objects suddenly appearing on the screen to scare you, the sudden spikes in music. No, it was more based on creating this vibe, this atmosphere, to use slow, long shots to evoke this feeling of dread. They didn't shy away from showing you the actual vampire in all his glory. I also what also can be noticed is of course all the limitations of that time. So in terms of the jump scares and not using the easy tricks of today, where I think that works better for the film even when you watch it today. Some of the other limitations actually hold it back. Of course, the black and white film, which I watched the restoration, which I'm not sure if this thing was done for the original film or just in the restoration, but the version that I watched had like colored hues on separate scenes. So scenes at night had this blue hue on them. Scenes in the daylight sun had this yellow hue on them. So it kind of operated with color, but in general it's black and white. It doesn't have any dialogue. The only story beats that need to be told directly are told through basically text boxes that appear for a couple of seconds at a time. There's also the camera movement thing. Because of how early it was made and how not advanced the production company was, all of the shots in the film are stationary. The camera actually never moves. The actors do, yes, but the camera is always stationary. It doesn't even rotate. There are no pans, no zooms. The camera is not swirled around. It just stays stationary for every single scene, which is kind of noticeable. But that is a limitation on what you can really do with the film. So, as I said, when it was released, highly praised, and over the years it had a lot of influence on other pieces of media involving vampires, but not just vampires, horror as a whole. But the real question is, does it hold up today as a film and not just as this museum piece to see how cinema used to look like? And I think that the answer is sadly no. It doesn't really hold up as a film in its own right today. There are movies from the early era like 12 Angry Men or Casablanca that have held up magnificently. You can watch them today and after 5 minutes you forget that it's an old film. But Nosferatu, you still see it in every scene. You feel it in every second. It has gotten old and it's not that engaging. I think that the things that it tries to use to be scary don't really work anymore because of the technical limitations, but also because we have seen them so many times. We have become desensitized to such types of horror. When it was released, one of the most scary things about it was the way that Count Orlok looked like Max Schreck in this heavy makeup of Nosferatu. But because we've seen so many better things by now, and also because Nosferatu himself has been parodied so many times, I didn't find it scary. I found it creepy at times, but at different times, especially when he was shown like in very close-ups of his face, I found the makeup to be actually quite funny, which definitely wasn't intentional. So at the end of the day, I think at this day, I think it remains a movie for cinema fans. If like me, you're interested to sometimes go really way back and see how films used to be made and what difference did almost a century make in techniques of filmmaking and where all those inspirations came from, then yes, it's an interesting museum piece. But as a horror film, I don't think it holds up anymore.